and good evening. I am Gursshheen Gahllen and you're watching Vantage. It's day 8 of the Israel-Iran war and the conflict is still escalating. This is despite Donald Trump's decision to call a timeout. Will the US enter the war on Israel's side? Trump says he'll decide in 2 weeks. Tonight, we bring you down 4 scenarios that could influence his decision. Meanwhile, Israel isn't backing down from its war goals. It still wants to end Iran's nuclear program and push for regime change. Names of potential leaders are already doing the rounds. On the ground, the war is turning deadlier. Israel claims Iran has used cluster bombs. We'll explain what that means for the region. We'll also discuss where does China stand in this conflict and why is Beijing offering to mediate. In other news, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is heading to China next week. How is New Delhi managing this delicate relationship? In Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have signed a draft peace deal. Why US Vice President J.D. Vance has joined Blue Sky. Why an F-35 jet has been stranded in Kerala for 6 days. And how constant phone notifications are giving users alert fatigue. First, the headlines. Thousands protest in Iraq against the Iran-Israel war. The supporters of powerful Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sardar hold rallies in Baghdad and other cities. Iraq is both a significant ally of Iran and a strategic partner of Israel's key supporter, the US. China, Bangladesh and Pakistan hold their first trilateral meeting. Thursday's meeting was attended by key officials from all 3 countries. It was held in Kunming in China. The focus was on boosting trade and investment. Pakistan and Bangladesh are both part of Beijing's multi-billion ambitious Belt and Road Initiative project. 16 billion passwords have been exposed in a record-breaking data breach. Usernames and passwords linked to Apple, Facebook, Google, as well as government services were reportedly leaked. Researchers say the leak is the work of multiple info stealers. Myanmar's junta and anti-coup guerrilla battle over the country's jade mining hub. Since the coup in 2021, Myanmar has been embroiled in a civil war. Jade is considered auspicious in Chinese culture, and high-quality stones can fetch huge sums in the neighboring country. Nepal's Prime Minister welcomes the discovery of large methane gas reserves in the Himalayan nation. This was found in a joint study with China. Petroleum products remain landlocked, Nepal's top import. This despite Kathmandu boosting its energy production through a dam-building spree. And there are more microplastics in glass bottles than plastic. That's according to a study released by France's Food Safety Agency. Researchers found around 100 microplastic particles per litre in glass bottles of soft drinks and beer. It was 5 to 50 times higher than the rate detected in plastic bottles or metal cans. It's day 8 of the Israel-Iran war, so we are over a week in. Yet nothing has changed. Missiles still fly, cities continue to burn, and both sides are showing no signs of backing down. Israel strikes Iranian cities and military installations. Iran targets Israeli urban centers, slipping past the Iron Dome. West Asia remains on the edge, and right now, peace feels like a distant dream. Let's begin with what's happening on ground. Iran is continuing with its missile strikes. On Thursday, it targeted Beersheba. This is a major city in the south of Israel. And again today, it was under fire. This time, a technology park took a direct hit. Residential buildings were damaged. Fires broke out, some near the Microsoft offices. 6 people were injured in the attack. On the other side, Israel struck Iran overnight, again. It hit almost a dozen targets in Tehran. One of them, it claims, was a facility used for nuclear research. The IDF also released dramatic footage. It shows a direct hit on an Iranian missile launcher. Also, multiple drone interceptions in real time. The Israeli Prime Minister says the goal is clear: stop Iran's nuclear program and remove the threat of ballistic missiles.
Our primary objective is to stop the nuclear program and remove it as a threat. The second goal is to halt the advancement of ballistic capabilities, also to remove it as a threat. In the process, it's clear the regime is destabilizing. We're also hitting government-related targets and centers of power. You've seen this with the broadcast center, and there's more to come.
As of now, Israel's death toll stands at 25. Over 8,000 people are homeless. More than 30,000 claims have poured in. This is for damage to property and vehicles. Amid all of this, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cancelled his son's wedding. It was supposed to take place on June 16th. Netanyahu called it a personal cost of the war, and that has led to a lot of backlash.
There are plenty of weddings canceled in Israel, or God forbid, not canceled but postponed. You're the one father in this country that has some control over this. Did it not bother you? Did you receive pressure at home? Maybe next week.
No. First of all, Avner and his fiancée and the family didn't know. I couldn't tell them.
Your wife didn't know?
My wife only knew one technical thing that I can't specify right now in order to get some things in order, but operational things, of course not.
Were they mad at you afterwards?
No, they understood it later, but it is very difficult. It is the second time Avner's wedding is cancelled.
On the other side, Iran has suffered even heavier losses. 224 people have been killed. This includes top military commanders, nuclear scientists, and civilians. In response, Tehran has cracked down hard. 24 people have been arrested. This is for allegedly spying for Israel. Another 223 have been detained. Tehran accuses of collaborating with the enemy. And now Iran has pulled the plug on the internet. It's the most extensive blackout since the 2019 anti-government protests. Many are describing this a total shutdown. This means no websites or services can be accessed. Today, protests broke out in the country over the Israeli strikes.
خامنه‌ای رهبر ایران اسلامی کربلا شده.
So things are only escalating on the ground. Several countries have suspended their embassy operations in Tehran. This includes New Zealand, Switzerland, and Australia. They are also evacuating their citizens from both countries. India has already evacuated 110 students from Iran. Tehran is making an exception for India. It is opening its airspace to facilitate evacuation. So 1,000 more students will return soon. New Delhi is also planning to evacuate citizens from Israel. Around 30,000 Indians live there. China has also evacuated 1,600 citizens from Iran. Beijing has asked its citizens to leave the country via land borders. Australia is evacuating 1,200 people from Israel. Some have already left on a ship to Cyprus. So evacuation operations are in full swing.
The government has directed the departure of all Australian officials and dependents, and we have suspended our operations in Tehran. This is not a decision taken lightly.
As of now, utter coordination of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chinese embassies and consulates in Iran, Israel, and relevant neighboring countries, more than 1,600 Chinese nationals have been safely evacuated from Iran, and several hundred others have been evacuated from Israel.
But behind the scenes, another story is unfolding. There are murmurs of diplomacy. The US has drawn a line in the sand. It has set a 2-week deadline. Donald Trump says he'll decide within 14 days whether or not to strike Iran. But why the wait? Well, it is to give diplomacy one last shot. Meanwhile, the Europeans are already moving. Top EU diplomats are meeting Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Geneva. Officially, the agenda is Iran's nuclear program. But right now, it's all about de-escalation, to stop the missiles and to pull West Asia back from the edge. This is the first formal contact between Iran and the West since the war began last week.
We have always had dialogue with the Europeans and have discussed various issues with them. Even now, if they have something to say, we are listening. We are not ashamed of defending the rights of the Iranian people, and we are not avoiding anyone.
But the ball is now in Iran's court, and Israel can rely on Germany to always keep an eye on and defend the security and existence of the Israeli state. That is part of our raison d'etre, and that is also my guiding principle in today's talks. Thank you very much.
For several days now, France has spoken with a clear, simple voice. Firstly, nothing justifies strikes on energy infrastructure and civilian populations. Nothing. And secondly, we must absolutely prioritize a return to substantive negotiations centered on the nuclear issue, with the goal of achieving zero enrichment.
But as the conflict enters its second week, peace still feels like a mirage in West Asia. The diplomats may be talking in Geneva, but the skies over the region remain anything but quiet. And with each passing hour, West Asia inches closer to a point of no return. The next 14 days could decide everything. Will he or won't he? That's what everyone wants to know. Will Donald Trump join the war against Iran? Or will he stay on the sidelines? Well, the White House has given us a clear answer. Trump wants to take his time. He will take call after 2 weeks.
Message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
Why 2 weeks? It seems to be Donald Trump's favorite timeline. Setting the war in Ukraine, wait for 2 weeks. Cracking down on illegal migrants, let's see how it goes in 2 weeks.
We'll be reporting back sometime over the next 2 weeks as to NAFTA.
I'll be making a big decision on the Paris Accord over the next 2 weeks. And the minds are starting to open up. We're having a big opening in 2 weeks.
We've had tremendous success against ISIS in our fight in the Middle East. We're doing very, very well. We're going to be having a news conference in 2 weeks on that fight.
There are two possible explanations for this delay. Number one, it's a bluff. We saw that last week as well. Trump kept hammering on about talks. He forced the Iranians to drop their guard. And on cue, Israel struck. Perhaps he is using the same tactic again, forcing the Iranians to drop their guard for 14 days. Or number two, it's a genuine timeout. Perhaps Trump wants to see how this plays out. Right now, he's under a lot of pressure. Israel is urging him to join the war. Hawkish Republicans are pushing him to strike Iran. MAGA Republicans are urging restraint. So Trump is saturated with advice. It makes sense for him to call a timeout. After all, this could be the most consequential decision of his presidency. The question is, what will shape that decision? We can think of 4 factors. First is the diplomatic push. Iran's foreign minister is speaking to European leaders. There is a campaign to settle things at the table. I'm sure Trump would like to see how that goes. In fact, his spokeswoman mentioned that. She said there is substantial chance for negotiations. The hope is that Iran will abandon uranium enrichment on its own. The problem is there is a trust deficit.
Let me make the position clear. Under the current circumstances, and as the Zionist regime's attacks continue, we are not seeking negotiations with anyone, especially not with the United States, on this matter. It is the Americans who are seeking negotiations. They have sent messages multiple times, including very serious ones.
Factor 2 is success rate. Trump is asking around about the bunker buster bombs. Israel does not have these weapons. Only the US has the bomb and the plane to carry it. So Donald Trump is curious. He wants to know if the bomb will be 100% successful. If that's not guaranteed, the operation would make little sense. Next is the third factor, the blowback. The US has a lot of assets in West Asia. They have some 19 military facilities. Put together, they host around 50,000 US soldiers. If Trump attacks, those assets could be at risk. Iran could fire missiles at US bases in the region. We have seen that before. In 2020, Iran struck America's Al-Assad base in Iraq. They fired some 11 ballistic missiles at it. This time, the reprisal could be worse. Plus, Iran is also likely to cut off the Strait of Hormuz. This is a water channel in West Asia. It carries around 20% of the world's oil. Just north of this strait is Iran. If Trump attacks, Iran could close off the Hormuz. The result, skyrocketing oil prices, which brings us to the final factor, the domestic mood in America. Most Democrats have lined up against this policy. They want Donald Trump to exercise restraint, even if he joins the war. They want Congress to make that call. And the Republicans, they are split down the middle. The old-school Republicans want to join the war, especially hawks like John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and Mitch McConnell. But the MAGA Republicans, they don't see the point. You see, Trump was supposed to be the no-war president. He was in Saudi Arabia last month. Listen to what he said about foreign interventions and neo-colonialism.
In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
So Trump promised to end the endless wars. He said no more foreign meddling, and his supporters bought it. They want Trump to stay out of the war against Iran. This includes some powerful MAGA voices, like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson. And these four factors will shape Trump's decision. If genuine, his timeout call makes sense. More time equals more Iranian defenses destroyed, more depletion of Iran's missile stockpile, and more clarity on the battle situation. But like all timeouts, it only freezes the game situation. It cannot prevent the inevitable. For our next story, let's go back in time. The year was 1953. Mohammad Mossadegh was Iran's democratically elected prime minister. He moved to nationalize the country's oil, one that was under British control for decades. The United Kingdom was not pleased, neither is Washington. So in classic Cold War style, the CIA and MI6 engineer a coup. Mossadegh was ousted. A puppet monarch, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was reinstalled. For the West, this was a win. For Iran, this was the seed of the 1979 revolution, one that toppled the Shah and brought in the Islamic regime. Fast forward to 2025, and the whispers of regime change are back in the air. Where did this chatter come from? Who is saying what? And could another regime change in Iran end up in blunder? Let's look at it. First, Israel strikes killed Iranian top leaders. Then Israel approved a plan to kill the country's supreme leader. US President Donald Trump vetoed it. But he did issue a threat to Ayatollah Khamenei. He said Washington knew where he was hiding and that they were not killing him, at least for now. Since then, Israel has asked multiple times about regime change. And Netanyahu has just one thing to say. The operational goal was not regime change, but it could happen in the process.
But the matter of regime change is, first and foremost, up to the Iranian people. There is no shortcut to that. Therefore, I have not set it as an official or declared goal. It may be a result, but it is not an explicit objective of our operation.
But his own defense minister took a more blunt stance. I am talking about this man, Israel Katz. He has talked about eliminating Khamenei, adding that the supreme leader should not exist.
We set the goals of the war to be removing nuclear and destruction and missile threats, and in them the IDF was instructed and knows that in order to achieve them, within the overall targets, this man should not continue to exist.
Now the West already has a history of regime change in Iran, so manufacturing another one isn't a stretch for them. But in 1953, they had the Shah. Who do they have now? If the Islamic regime collapses, who takes over? Currently, there are a lot of names doing the rounds. The first is Reza Pahlavi. He is the son of Iran's last Shah. In 1979, his family fled the country and have since been living in exile. Since then, Reza Pahlavi has been living in the United States. He hasn't gone back to the country for over 45 years. Yet, he's propping himself up as an alternative. But while he commands some nostalgic loyalty, Reza Pahlavi has no clear base. More importantly, the Iranians don't like him.
The end of the Islamic Republic is the end of its 46-year war against the Iranian nation. The regime's apparatus of repression is falling apart. All it takes now is a nationwide uprising to put an end to this nightmare once and for all.
The second is the MEK. This is the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. It is a left-wing Muslim group. Its leader, Masoud Rajavi, has not been seen for more than 20 years. So his wife, Maryam Rajavi, has taken control. The MEK wants to overthrow the regime, but it has skeletons in its closet. It was once aligned with Saddam Hussein. It also has Washington connections. So the Iranians don't trust them much. Third, there are progressive reformists. They have charisma, but no party structure. There are talks of them forming an emergency government with former President Hassan Rouhani and former Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. Four, there are ethnic minority groups, like the Kurdish and Baloch minorities. They have their grievances with the regime, but they also harbor secessionist aspirations. There is also the Women Life Freedom Movement. It started after the killing of the 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She was killed for not wearing a hijab properly. This set off massive protests in the country. This movement was leading those protests, but it has no leader or roadmap. So Iran does have an opposition, but it is heavily fragmented. There is no one successor. And Iranians have paid the price for outside interference before. They don't want to pay it again. After all, this is a country of 90 million people. If it collapses, the consequences will be catastrophic. Think Syria, but 10 times bigger. Think Iraq on steroids. Think Libya, only with nuclear know-how.
Does anyone think that what was done in Iraq in 2003 was a good idea? Does anyone think that what was done in Libya the next decade was a good idea? No. I'm also thinking of our friends in the region, in Iraq, Lebanon, and elsewhere. We must help them reduce everything that, indeed, threatens their security, but they need anything but chaos.
The fallout could include a lot of scenarios. One, a dangerous power vacuum, warlords, militias, and extremist groups scrambling for control. Two, a humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of refugees flooding neighboring countries and Europe. And three, nuclear weapons. Their technology or even material could fall in unknown hands. So a failed Iran isn't just a West Asian crisis. It's a global security nightmare in the making. And if recent history has taught us anything, from Iraq to Libya, regime collapse without a clear plan doesn't end conflict. It only opens the gates to chaos. Israel's bid for regime change are far-fetched, but Tehran isn't taking these threats lightly. It's bringing new and dangerous weapons into this conflict. Yesterday, Iran used a cluster bomb against Israel. It's a weapon banned by over 100 countries. The missile scattered dozens of small explosives across central Israel. Some failed to detonate, and now they pose a long-term threat because these explosives can act like hidden landmines. This marks a major escalation. Iran is digging deeper into its arsenal, and deadly weapons are entering the battlefield. Here's a report.
The war between Iran and Israel is entering a far more dangerous phase. Yesterday, Iran fired a missile at central Israel. But this wasn't an ordinary missile. It carried a cluster warhead, a weapon banned by over 100 countries. A weapon designed not to hit one target, but to inflict widespread destruction. Iran is said to have used this weapon on Israel. The Israeli military confirmed the strike. Their home front command issued a warning. Bomblets had fallen across multiple locations. 10 sites have been identified so far. Some of those submunitions did not explode. They were found lying on the ground. Authorities are urging the public to stay away from them and report any suspicious debris. This is the first known use of cluster weapons in this war, and it could signal what comes next. Let's look at how this weapon works. A cluster bomb is not a single explosive. It's a delivery system. Inside the missile are dozens, sometimes hundreds, of smaller bomblets. After the missile is launched, it breaks open mid-air. The bomblets scatter over a wide area. Each one is designed to detonate on impact. But many of them don't. They remain hidden. They can explode hours later, or even after years, like landmines. That's what makes them so dangerous. And that's why these weapons are so controversial. Human rights groups have condemned them for decades. They say cluster munitions can't distinguish between a soldier and a child, between a military base and a neighborhood. Over 100 nations agree. They signed a treaty in 2008 to ban them, the Convention on Cluster Munitions. But key powers like the US, Russia, India, and China refused to join treaty. Even Israel and Iran haven't banned these weapons. Israel used cluster weapons against in Lebanon in 2006. Russia and Ukraine have used them in their ongoing conflict. And now, Iran has deployed it against Israel. Why now? Why has Iran escalated? Because the war is intensifying. It began with Israeli airstrikes on Iranian targets. Since then, Iran has fired over 400 missiles at Israel. Israel has responded in kind. Now, Tehran wants to hit back harder, so it's turning to more destructive tools. Cluster bombs are a sign of that shift. They are not just a weapon, they're a statement. Iran is telling Israel that it's ready to take this conflict further. Cluster weapons don't just change the battlefield, they change the rules of the war. They mark a new threshold, a point where both sides begin to take bigger risks. So far, this war has stayed between two countries. But weapons like these could change that, because once such weapons are used, the retaliation becomes severe, can the path back to peace more difficult. Iran's cluster strike is not just another missile attack. It's a warning that this war is not cooling down. Rather, it's heating up.
China opposes the violation of Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity.
Israel and Iran are still trading blows. Each day, more dangerous weapons are entering the battlefield. The risks of a wider war in West Asia are high. Amid the chaos, one country is pitching itself as the voice of reason. We are talking about China. Where does China stand in this conflict? So far, Beijing has condemned Israel's attack and sided with Iran. It is also positioning itself as a mediator. Over the weekend, Wang Yi spoke with his Israeli counterpart. Wang Yi is the foreign minister of China. He called Israel's airstrikes on Iran unacceptable. Wang Yi also spoke to Iran's foreign minister. He pledged Beijing's support to Tehran. Wang Yi said China is ready to help Iran ensure safety of its people and to defend its sovereignty. Earlier this week, Xi Jinping broke his silence as well. He said China is deeply worried by Israel's operations. The Chinese president laid out Beijing's position. He said no country should violate another's sovereignty and no side should escalate. Yesterday, Xi spoke to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. China and Russia are allies. Together, they presented a united front. Xi and Putin condemned Israel's actions and they called for de-escalation.
Both Moscow and Beijing fundamentally proceed from the fact that the resolution of the current situation and issues related to the Iranian nuclear program cannot be resolved by force, and this solution must be achieved exclusively through political and diplomatic means.
Xi Jinping also took a dig at the US and its President Donald Trump. Beijing released a statement after the call. It said major powers should cool the situation and not do the opposite. Yesterday, China's foreign ministry also made similar comments.
The international community, especially major powers with influence, should adopt a just position and a responsible attitude, work to promote a ceasefire.
It's a clear message to the United States. China wants to look like the sensible player, President Xi Jinping as the peacemaker, and project President Donald Trump as the troublemaker. That's the picture Beijing is trying to paint. It has offered to help out on several occasions now.
As I just said, China Foreign Minister Wang Yi had a phone call with the Israeli Foreign Minister in the weekend, urging both Iran and Israel to resolve their differences through dialogue. China will continue to play its role in resolving the current Iran-Israel conflict.
What's driving this push from Beijing? China has a lot at stake in West Asia. It depends on the region for oil supplies. China is a major buyer of Iranian oil. More than 90% of Iran's oil goes to China. Much of it is paid in yuan. China buys oil from other West Asian supplies as well. About half of that supply sails through the Strait of Hormuz. This is a narrow sea passage off Iran's southern coast. So if a wider war breaks out, if ships are unable to pass through the strait, China's energy supplies would be at risk. They could even be disrupted. This would be bad news for China. Oil prices are already rising. If supplies get hit, prices could shoot up substantially and cause economic pain to China. Because already the Chinese economy is witnessing a slowdown. Higher oil prices will hurt its recovery. But energy is just one piece of the puzzle. Iran is also a geopolitical ally. In 2021, Beijing and Tehran signed a 25-year cooperation deal. It spans trade, security, and military ties. Defense ties have been growing. In the past, China and Iran have held joint naval exercises, shared intelligence, and challenged US influence in the region. So for China, Iran is not just a partner. It's a key pillar of its West Asia strategy. So a wider war or any instability in West Asia would be a strategic blow for China. So how can China help Iran? In its statements, it has offered all kinds of support to Tehran. But in terms of tangible assistance, China can offer limited support to Iran. Tehran wants more than words. It wants weapons to defend itself against Iran. Can China provide that? That's highly unlikely. Since 2005, China hasn't sold any major arms to Iran. Why? Because such sales would trigger sanctions. It would isolate China from global markets. And that's a risk Beijing is not willing to take. Earlier this year, the US sanctioned several Chinese and Hong Kong firms. They were accused of helping Iran source drone parts. They are shadow deals and not official military support. And that's the limit of China's engagement. It won't fight for Iran, it won't arm it for war, and it won't take sides in a way that threatens Beijing's economic interests. So China may call itself a mediator, but it has limited leverage. Beijing is calling for peace. It has criticized Israel from the sidelines, but it cannot compel Israel to stop. It cannot force a ceasefire. So China's mediation offer is dead on arrival. It carries little weight, no leverage, and no serious takers. Speaking of China, it is gearing up to host a meeting of the SCO. As you know, SCO is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is a regional grouping in Eurasia. And guess who's on the guest list? India's Defense Minister, Rajnath Singh. He will travel to China's Qingdao next week. It's a very significant trip. Rajnath Singh will be the first minister to visit China since 2020. That's when the Galwan clashes happened. Indian and Chinese soldiers faced off in Ladakh. Multiple lives were lost on both sides. And after that, India and China were locked in a standoff. Both sides deployed heavy weapons and soldiers, and as a result, ties were frozen. Then last year, Beijing and New Delhi struck a border deal. They agreed to pull back deployments. They also sought to normalize the relationship, which brings us to today. Rajnath Singh will break a 6-year freeze in ties. He will meet China's defense minister next week. Also at the summit will be Pakistan's defense minister, Khwaja Asif. And that's another significance of this trip. It's Rajnath Singh's first foreign mission since Operation Sindoor. We'll be tracking the trip closely. But for now, let's place it in context. How is India handling its relationship with China? New Delhi has agreed to restart talks on trade and travel. Business ties are also recovering. In 2024, India received 526 investment applications from China. Out of these, 124 were approved, and 200 are still pending. Despite these gains, problems remain. Consider what China did in April. They began curbing exports of rare earth magnets. Now, these magnets are crucial items. They are used to make EVs, electronic items, and motors. Just one problem, though. China makes around 90% of these magnets. If China limits supply, there will be a shortage. And that's what happened in India. Indian producers began complaining about these curbs, so New Delhi is plotting a solution, a special scheme to expand rare earth magnet production. And how much money is being set aside? Between 3,500 and 5,000 crore rupees, which is around $460 million. The idea is to end the dependence on China. Of course, this won't happen overnight. China took decades to build up their rare earth industry. So this solution is long-term, and that's the problem with India's relations with China. On paper, people say we should work together. Massive populations, massive economies, and massive potential. But that's easier said than done. China has territorial ambitions in India. They are also an economic competitor of India. Basically, we are fighting for the same markets. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal spoke about that yesterday, though his choice of words has triggered a backlash. Let me quote what he said. If I do an ASEAN agreement with Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, it really is silly because I am opening up my market to my competitors. Many of the ASEAN members have now become the B team of China. So effectively and indirectly, I have opened up my market for goods that find their way from China into India. To give you some context, ASEAN is a regional grouping of 10 countries. Think of it as Southeast Asia's European Union. India and ASEAN implemented a free trade deal in 2010. But Piyush Goyal says that was silly. Why? Because the minister feels ASEAN nations have become China's B team. India's opposition has slammed this claim. Many ASEAN nations have border disputes with China. They have also clashed in the open seas. Nonetheless, the minister's larger point was this. India and China compete for the same market, and that will be a key challenge to this reset. We can alter political equations, we can overcome historical hesitancy, but can we sidestep economic and trade realities? The answer could shape the future of India-China ties. Now let's turn our attention to Africa, where two neighbors have been embroiled in a bitter conflict for decades now. I am talking about the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. At the center of this feud is eastern DR Congo. It is a mineral-rich region, and it has been dogged by conflict. Armed groups have competed for power in the region. Thousands of people have lost their lives, and many more have been displaced. But now there is hope for peace. The two neighbors have signed a draft peace deal. This is a provisional agreement to stop the conflict. What does it say, and what does this mean for the conflict? Our next report tells you.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. For decades now, the two African neighbors have engaged in a bitter feud. But now, the two nations want to end the conflict in the mineral-rich eastern DRC. Officials from DR Congo and Rwanda have held talks over 3 days in Washington, mediated by the US and Qatar. And now, they have signed a provisional agreement to stop the conflict. It looks at an array of issues, including disarmament, the armed groups fighting in eastern DR Congo, the return of refugees and internally displaced people, and a joint security mechanism to prevent future flare-ups. The final peace deal is expected to be formally signed on June 27th. But this is a massive breakthrough nonetheless. After all, eastern DR Congo has been dogged by conflict for more than 30 years. Bordering Rwanda, it has large mineral reserves including cobalt, copper, gold, and lithium, and it has been plagued by violence. About 100 armed groups have been competing for power in the region. They have been vying for control of the potential fortunes. Among them is the M23. This is mainly made up of the ethnic group of Rwandan origin called Tutsis. M23 says it is defending the community from discrimination, but the rebel group has been accused of torturing and killing civilians. It has captured a number of key cities and towns in eastern DRC. According to the UN, the rebels are supported by about 4,000 troops from Rwanda. DR Congo has also repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing M23.
Rwanda's defense forces, in support of their M23 puppet, are continuing their terrorist enterprise on our territory, sowing terror and desolation among our populations. These acts are not only an attack on the Republic, but an affront to the history and dignity of our people.
Rwanda denies supporting the M23. They insist the Rwandan military presence in the region is to defend against threats posed by armed groups. The conflict escalated earlier this year. In January, M23 captured Goma. This is the mineral-rich area's largest city. A few weeks later, the group seized the strategic town of Bukavu. And fighting has intensified since. Thousands of people have been killed in the region, and hundreds of thousands of others have been displaced. So weeks after the flare-up, worried about the loss of territory, Kinshasa turned to the US for help. And reportedly, they offered access to their critical minerals in return. Soon after, the US intervened. In late April, Rwanda and DR Congo signed an agreement in Washington, promising to respect each other's sovereignty. And now, the latest draft agreement builds on it. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has described the move as a win-win, because it looks at a twin aim: peace and investment. After all, Peace in the resource-rich region could open the way for billions of dollars of Western investment. But a lot of questions remain unanswered. For instance, will M23 withdraw from the areas it has occupied? Will Rwanda withdraw its troops from eastern DR Congo? And will the rebel groups lay down their arms? Plus, peace deals between the two neighbors have unraveled in the past. Like last year, when the two reached a peace agreement twice under Angolan mediation. But both countries failed to comply, and Angola eventually stepped down as a mediator. So will history repeat itself? Or will fighting finally end in eastern DR Congo? The world should find out soon enough.
Moving on to the United States. The Vice President just made a digital move and it's turning heads. He's joined Blue Sky, a new buzzy social media platform that's being called Anti-X. JD Vance is now inviting his 4 million followers on X to follow him into bluer skies. But here's where it gets strange. Within minutes of joining, JD Vance's account was suspended. Why? Blue Sky thought he was a fake. The account has since been restored, but the move has people asking, why Blue Sky? Why now? Is this just tech curiosity or is Vance sending a political signal? Our next story breaks it all down.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has 4.3 million followers on X. Yet, he is asking his followers to move to a new platform. It goes by the name of Blue Sky. Blue Sky is, in the simplest terms, the social media platform that wants to be what Twitter was before Elon Musk. Same short-form posts, same retweets, same blue and white color scheme. Even the profile layouts feel like déjà vu. But behind the familiar interface is a very different philosophy. Blue Sky is decentralized. That means users don't have to rely on Blue Sky's servers. They can, in theory, own their data and even host it themselves. The idea is that the internet shouldn't be run by billionaires or owned by one company. It ironically came from a billionaire, Jack Dorsey, Twitter's co-founder. He envisioned Blue Sky as a kind of utopian experiment after he left Twitter. But in 2024, he walked away from the project entirely. Since then, Blue Sky's been helmed by CEO Jay Graber and operates as a U.S. public benefit corporation. But it has a reputation of being a liberal, anti-X sort of social media platform, almost like a progressive answer to Musk's X. So what is the U.S. Vice President doing on it? On the surface, Vance's move might look like nothing more than social media diversification. On Wednesday, the Vice President shared screenshots of his Blue Sky page on the X platform. Vance's Blue Sky account was even briefly suspended. The platform believed it could have been set up by an imposter. But dig deeper, and it reads like a political statement. Elon Musk was once tight with Trump and a regular presence in Republican tech circles. But 2 weeks ago, he had a dramatic falling out with the Trump-Vance axis. So, it's no coincidence that Vance's migration comes in the wake of that fallout. Joining Blue Sky lets him sidestep Musk's influence, all while projecting a kind of tech-savvy populism. Now, Blue Sky isn't yet a household name, but it's growing fast. The platform recently passed 30 million users. For comparison, X still has the edge in raw numbers. Elon Musk claims 250 million daily users and over 600 million active accounts. But that dominance is beginning to wobble. That's because X has been criticized for allowing hate speech and misinformation to continue unchecked. Which explains the exodus to Blue Sky. Whether the platform can keep the momentum going is the billion-dollar question, but it also reflects a broader shift. Once every politician had to be on Twitter to talk to the world, but the Trump administration does things differently. Donald Trump shares his thoughts on his social media platform, Truth Social. Now his VP is on Blue Sky for a new audience and a fresh narrative. If Blue Sky is the future of political discourse, then the vice president is just getting in early. And what we're seeing here isn't just a platform switch. It's a glimpse into a fragmented digital future, where every ideology might have its own social media platform. Truth Social, X, Blue Sky. Politics, like tech, loves a new frontier. The question now isn't just who gets heard, it's who owns the megaphone. And in this sky full of competing clouds, only one will end up controlling the weather.
A $100 million jet, a sudden emergency landing, and a curious delay. Our next story has all the makings of a thriller. It's about a British fighter jet stuck in India. And not just any jet, the most advanced fighter plane on the planet, the F-35. Last Saturday, it made an emergency landing in India's Kerala state. Most of us expected it to fly out soon. After all, this was an expensive and strategically sensitive plane. But 6 days on, the F-35 is still there. Officials say if the jet cannot be repaired, it could be taken back on a transport plane. So naturally, questions are being asked. What led to the emergency landing last Saturday? Why hasn't the plane returned yet? And should the UK be concerned? Our next report has the answers.
There it stands, through relentless rain and piercing heat. All $100 million of lethal air power. What you're looking at is a British F-35 fighter jet, the most advanced warplane in the world. And don't fall for the gloomy weather, because this isn't London or Manchester. It is the Thiruvananthapuram airport in India's Kerala state. How did a British fighter jet end up here? The story begins on Saturday night. A British aircraft carrier, HMS Prince of Wales, was in the Arabian Sea. This F-35 jet was part of the drills being conducted there. At around 8:50 p.m., the plane took off from the carrier, but 30 minutes later, it was running out of fuel and unable to return to its mothership. That's when the pilot contacted the Thiruvananthapuram airport. Once clearance was granted, the fighter jet landed at around 9:30 p.m. The same night, a British repair crew arrived to check the aircraft. It's been 6 days since that check, but the plane remains stranded in India. So what went wrong? Experts say the issue may not have been fuel alone. If it was, the plane would have refueled and been on its way back. They feel there could be a technical snag, perhaps with the hydraulic system. If true, that would explain the delay, because we are talking about a very complicated machine. F-35 is a fifth-generation fighter jet. It is made by the American aerospace company Lockheed Martin. The US has sold this plane to allies like the UK, Canada, Germany, Denmark, Israel, and Japan. This stranded plane is an F-35B version. It is designed to take off from shorter runways, making it ideal for carriers. India does not operate these F-35 planes. Plus, not every airport or airbase is equipped to repair them. You will need specialized equipment which may have to receive government clearance. Logistics aside, this episode has triggered a debate, because after Saturday's emergency landing, the Indian Air Force posted this message. On having declared a diversion off an emergency, the F-35B was detected and identified by the IAF's IACCS network and cleared for the recovery. Two words stand out in this Indian Air Force statement: detected and identified. The F-35 is supposed to be a stealth plane. It is expected to evade radars and air defense systems. Yet the Indian Air Force claims it identified and detected the aircraft. Clearly not as stealthy as the claims. In Thiruvananthapuram, the locals have joined in on the conversations around the jet. Some of them posted resale advertisements for the plane. Not sure the British government will agree, though. We do hope the plane and its pilot can eventually be on their way, but you cannot deny the irony. The US government is hoping to sell the F-35 jet to India. New Delhi too is hunting for a fifth-generation plane, but it hasn't decided yet. On the one hand, you have the F-35 jet. On the other, you have the Russian Su-57. And if you don't want either, India is making a fifth-gen plane of its own. In the middle of that decision comes this emergency landing. Not a good marketing pitch. But for now, this F-35 stands on the tarmac, a lone paramilitary officer guarding it. Stuck and far from home,
Does trying to open your phone feel like a high-stress game? Maybe you want to check the weather, so you look at the phone. But suddenly you are greeted with a barrage of notifications. A software update, a pointless post on the alumni group, and a news flash about everything wrong with the world. It can feel taxing, but know that you are not alone. A new report is out. It says that notifications are giving rise to what's called an alert fatigue. Our next report tells you more.
A ding here, a ping there, and a buzz everywhere. In the digital world, these sounds are our bird call. And in the land of notifications, news alerts are a thriving entity. From wars to climate disasters to economic turmoil, breaking news is often considered too important to miss. But the result is this. Smartphone users typically get at least 50 notifications from news apps every day. This is a global scenario. CNN Indonesia and the Jerusalem Post send up to 50 alerts each day. The New York Times about 10 a day. In fact, over the last decade, the use of news alerts has only grown. For instance, in the U.S., from 6% to 23%, and in the UK, from 3% to 18%. And mounting evidence shows that this is not good for us. In fact, there is a term for being hounded by notifications constantly. It is called alert fatigue, and obviously it doesn't feel great. The Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism has released a new report. They surveyed people the world over. They found that 79% people don't receive any news alerts during an average week. And 43% of them had actively disabled the alerts. They complained of receiving too many notifications. Meaning, as news alerts jostle for people's attention, they have pushed people to cut off from them. And experts say that this could cause problems for the whole industry. In fact, Apple and Google have regularly warned publishers about sending too many alerts. But things have hardly changed. And this is not just about news alerts. It is also about notifications from games, entertainment, or social media apps. For instance, teenagers get as many as 237 or more notifications every day. This is bad for both companies and users. Too many notifications are hurting our attention spans. It is tricky to focus on tasks when a device is constantly beeping next to you. In a recent study, people were asked to review CVs to find the ideal candidate for a job. People who were interrupted by notifications were 17% less likely to choose the best candidate. After all, when our attention span goes for a toss, so does our productivity. And often, so do our relationships. Ignoring someone who is talking to you to constantly check notifications is all too common. In fact, there's a word for it. It is called phubbing. This may sound funny, but numerous studies show that anxiety and depression are higher among people who pay more attention to their devices than to their friends when socializing. Plus, life satisfaction is lower. But the irony is, notifications are fueling a vicious cycle. The more we check our phones, the more we want to, thanks to the dopamine hits. Notifications target our biological wanting and seeking mechanism. They trigger our interest. They often make us feel good, and in turn, they harm us. It may seem like a near impossible task to reduce our notification checks, but we owe it to ourselves. After all, checking notifications is often nothing more than unwrapping the biggest, but the most disappointing gift on a Christmas morning. Except, all day, every day, is that Christmas morning.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Ukrainians rescue a woman from a burning house after Russia attacks Odessa. The Paris Air Show showcases autonomous electric flying taxis, and the first panda-themed monorail train makes its debut in China. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 2001, General Pervez Musharraf was formally sworn in as Pakistan's president. This was after he removed then-President Rafiq Tarar. It happened 2 years after Musharraf seized power from Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in a military coup. We leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.
Second consideration.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka kajho.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
4兆ドル以上も
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.